Welcome to John Hancock's Banned Books. Today we're talking about Ray Bradbury's 1953 novel, Fahrenheit 451. Set in the 24th century, Ray Bradbury creates an authoritarian dystopian a world in which individuality is shunned and punished, a world in which complete obedience is required by law. In order to maintain this obedience, the state is in a constant state of war or fear of upcoming war. Now, Bradbury was plugging in quarters into a library typewriter almost a decade after Little Boy and Fat Man shocked the world and left both physical and metaphorical holes filled by fear, propaganda, and stringent nationalism of the Cold War and nuclear age.
In 1953, U.S. citizens' fear of nuclear war is dependent upon a combination of actual knowledge of the effects of our use of nuclear weapons in 1945 and an undercurrent fear of Russia's use of those same weapons on us. However, in Bradbury's narrative, citizens live in a world with no reminders of history or appreciation of the past. The population receives a version of the present via governmental-controlled television programs. Indeed, its citizens are surrounded, both literally and figuratively, by televisions that promote governmental ideology, that is, the complete obedience of the status quo.
Now, oh yeah, definitely.
Bradbury states that his fear of TV and media's growing influence on society was his paramount reason for writing his narrative. His fear that TV would knock literature to the wayside, his fear that TV would destroy creativity, destroy critical thought, has a direct influence on his prose. Fahrenheit 451, books and the contents within them are declared illegal and destroyed by state-mandated book burning.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Bradbury portrays the means of oppression and regimentation through the life of an uneducated and complacent, and though ultimately virtuous, working-class hero named Guy Montag. The story begins with an inciting incident in which Montag meets Clarice McLeod. Montag, a fireman who actually destroys books for a living, is walking home from work when a young Clarice approaches and introduces herself. Clarice is quite the contrast of anyone Montag has ever met. She is young, enthusiastic, energetic, but notably, she converses with him about things he has never considered and reminds him of the natural world. Her inquisitiveness fascinates him because she ponders philosophical quandaries: happiness, love, the smell and taste of the natural world, and, importantly, the context of the books he actually burns. He walks home, enters his bedroom to find an empty bottle of sleeping pills, and discovers that his wife, Mildred, whether intentionally or unintentionally, has overdosed. He calls the emergency squad, and the strangers come in with their snake-like machines to save his wife. Importantly here, like similar dystopian authors like Orwell or Huxley, self-medication is used to combat the essential alienation and disconnection faced by an authoritarian society. Several days pass, and Montag again converses with Clarice and learns that she fears the violence in her peers. She points out that their world used to be, in a not-so-distant past, entirely different, one where people talked, loved, and importantly, empathized. Now, one day at work, Montag and the firemen receive a call that an old woman has stashed books in her house. The firemen race to her home and begin destroying the illegal contraband. Montag urges the woman to leave the house because the entire home will be destroyed, but she refuses to leave her precious books. The home, along with the old woman and her books, is set ablaze, but not before Montag places a particular one into the confines of his car. Montag, fraught with his actions, decides to call in sick to work the next day. But he is surprised from a home visit from Beatty, the fire captain and physical symbol of governmental oppression. He is aware that Montag is keeping a book, and he is interested in reading its contents. Beatty converses at great length with Montag and tells him that every fireman, sometime in his career, gets the itch to read. But he also tells Montag that he may keep the book for 24 hours, yet he must return to work, book in hand, so that it can be properly destroyed. So Montag is left with a decision to make. Should he crack its spine and read and forever change his life, or should he keep the status quo, return the book to work, so that it can be burned? Now, ironically, Bradbury is exposing the impact the written world can have. It brings forth new ideas, surfaces old ideas, and the word also, of course, questions the status quo. The word voices concerns, and it allows the possibility of social plurality, or the direct expression of individuality. Which is why discussing the banning of a work, discussing banning independent thought, is colored with irony. Now, 451 has drawn most of its critical heat for its offensive language, assortment of damns and goddams, and for the fact that the Bible is one of the many books burned in the novel. In response to some of the objections, Ballantine, Fahrenheit 451's publisher at the time, created a highly edited high school edition of the book in the late 1960s, removing words like hell, damn, abortion, and modifying about 75 passages and even changing some plot points. At first, both versions of the book were being printed by, I think, 1973. This continued for most of the 70s until a group of high school students wrote to Bradbury questioning the differences between their school editions and older ones. Now, that wasn't the end. In 1987, 1992, and 2006, parents have complained that the unabridged book was part of a curriculum and insisted it be removed from libraries, protesting the violence and depictions of religion. Now, we have to remind ourselves of the Fire Captain Beatty's response. It wasn't the government who initiated this turn to ban literature. It came from the people. Special interest groups found so many things in books objectionable that people finally abandoned debate and started burning books. They stopped perceiving the value of reading controversial literature. Remember, as Bradbury says, you don't need to burn books to destroy culture, just get people to stop reading. Eventually, the public's demand for uncontroversial, easy pleasure caused printed matter to be diluted to a point that only Facebook posts, BuzzFeed quizzes, and Snapchat captions remained. Those remaining weirdos who read and advanced intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally over others who did not made them feel inferior. Enter the firemen to flag. But we're not there, right? We're not placing devices in our ears to block out the natural world, nor are we dislodging ourselves from conversation to glance blankly at a screen. But why should Fahrenheit 451 emblaze the intellectual curiosity of young adults? Why not cool the quest for knowledge with the cold water of censorship? Why not distort the world to remove all controversy? What is the use of a world where young people have role models who defy the status quo?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, that's the point of this work, right? It's a call to action. It brings us to you. You and your library card. You and your education. Only you can prevent the stagnation of free thought. Only you can snuff out the match of ignorance. The value of reading rests.